Every self-help account on the internet will tell you that making friends as an adult just takes putting yourself out there. Like friendship is a vending machine that dispenses a best friend the moment you insert enough small talk, which is a little ironic because plenty of extroverted, outgoing people who talk to everyone still end up with basically no close friends by their 30s. So if putting yourself out there alone worked, that wouldn't happen. In reality, making friends as an adult has almost nothing to do with being outgoing and almost everything to do with repeated exposure, which is a fancy way of saying friendship is less about charisma and more about showing up in the same room enough times. So let's get the obvious disclaimer out of the way. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a matchmaker, and I definitely haven't made every friend I've ever had gracefully, including the one time I tried to organize a group hangout that 3 people flaked on and 1 person showed up to alone with me, which in hindsight was just a really long one-on-one. But I do have a theory, and it can be explained by a chart. Picture a graph with 2 lines. One line is how much effort you put into any single interaction, how charming you are, how good the conversation goes. The other line is how many times you're exposed to the same person in a low-stakes, repeated setting. Most friendship advice focuses entirely on the first line, being interesting, having good conversation skills, when really, the entire outcome is determined by the second line, which almost nobody talks about because it sounds less exciting than just be more confident. Tip number 1. Understand that friendship is built through the mere exposure effect, not through single high-quality interactions. Psychologists have shown repeatedly that people tend to develop positive feelings toward people simply through repeated, unforced contact, even when the individual interactions themselves are unremarkable. This is why you can have a genuinely mediocre conversation with a coworker every day for 6 months and end up closer to them than someone you had one incredible 3-hour conversation with at a party, and then never saw again. Adults chronically overvalue the single great conversation and undervalue the boring repeated one, which is exactly backward from how the actual mechanism works. Tip number 2, and this is the part nobody wants to hear, stop trying to make friends and start trying to build a routine that puts you in the same room as the same people repeatedly. As a kid, you made friends almost automatically because school forced repeated exposure onto you for years without you doing anything. As an adult, nothing forces that structure onto you anymore, so if you don't manufacture it yourself, you simply won't get enough repeated exposure to anyone for the mere exposure effect to kick in. This isn't about joining one event and hoping for the best. It's about recognizing that a single "let's get coffee sometime" almost never converts into friendship. Because one meeting doesn't provide nearly enough repetition, regardless of how well it went. Tip number 3, pick a recurring structure over a one-off event every single time. A weekly pickup basketball game, a recurring book club, a class you attend every Tuesday, a standing dinner with the same group. These all beat a single well-organized party by a wide margin, because the structure itself does the repetition for you automatically. You don't have to remember to text anyone or manufacture plans from scratch each time. The calendar does that job. This is also why so many adult friendships form at work or in long-term hobbies like a sports league. It's not that those environments contain more compatible people. It's that they force involuntary repeated contact the same way school used to. There's actually a deeper reason this works, which almost nobody explains. Repeated low-stakes contact removes the social pressure that makes single interactions feel so exhausting. When you know you're going to see the same person next week, regardless of how this specific conversation goes, you stop needing to make this exact interaction count, which paradoxically makes you more relaxed, funnier, and easier to be around. A lot of adult social anxiety around meeting new people actually comes from treating every interaction like a final exam instead of one rep in a longer, lower-stakes series. Tip number 4. Lower your bar for what counts as an acceptable interaction, because adults wildly overestimate how good a hangout needs to be. You don't need a deep 2-hour conversation every time you see someone. A 20-minute chat while walking your dogs on the same schedule, small talk before a recurring class starts, texting one meme back and forth, these are all valid reps that build toward friendship over time. If you're waiting for every single interaction to feel meaningful before it counts, you'll unconsciously filter out 90% of the repetition that would have actually gotten you there. Tip number 5. Be the one who organizes, even when it feels unnatural, because someone has to run the recurring structure, and most adults are quietly waiting for someone else to do it. This doesn't mean you need to become a natural extrovert who loves planning things. It means recognizing that a recurring hangout only exists if at least one person keeps sending the calendar invite. And if you wait for someone else to consistently be that person, You'll often wait indefinitely because everyone else is doing the exact same calculation. Being the organizer also has a hidden benefit. It puts you at the center of the repeated contact instead of at the mercy of whether you happen to get invited this time. Tip number 6. Treat proximity as a variable you can actually engineer, not a fixed fact about your life. Adults tend to assume their current environment, their current job, their current neighborhood, is simply the pool of people available to them, and either it contains potential friends or it doesn't. But proximity is closer to a dial than a fixed setting. Moving your workout to the same class time every week, choosing the coffee shop where you always see the same regulars, picking a gym near your apartment instead of near your office. These are all small engineering choices that increase how often you cross paths with the same set of people. And increased crossing paths is the entire input the mere exposure effect runs on. Tip number 7. Expect the exponential difficulty curve because most people give up right around the point where it would have started paying off. The first few times you show up to a recurring thing, it usually feels awkward, forced, and like nothing is happening, so people conclude the group just isn't clicking and stop going. But the mere exposure effect doesn't kick in immediately. It accumulates. Meaning the 5th or 6th time you show up is often when things start to feel natural, right after most people have already quit out of frustration with the first few attempts. Tip number 8. Don't rely on a single big moment of connection. Rely on the schedule doing the work for you. In the moment, it's tempting to judge whether tonight's specific hangout felt like a real bonding experience, and if it didn't, to assume the whole thing was a failure. This means treating anyone gathering as the verdict on the entire friendship is a losing strategy, because friendship isn't formed in any single session. It's formed across the accumulated total of many forgettable sessions. Instead, commit to the recurring structure itself as the plan. When this event happens, I show up, so there's no decision left to make each time. Just a rule to follow. Tip number 9. Track your actual reps instead of just your gut feeling about how the friendship is going. Because the sense that nothing's happening is usually about how any single hangout felt, not about the accumulating total. It's easy to leave one slightly awkward dinner and conclude the whole thing is stalling, and hard to notice that you've actually seen this person 6 times in 2 months, which is more repeated contact than you've had with almost anyone else in your life recently. Counting the actual number of times you've shown up gives you a concrete number to check your feelings against. Instead of relying purely on vibes from the most recent and often least representative, single interaction. Tip number 10, and the last one. Forgive the awkward interactions fast, because the spiral after one bad hangout is usually more damaging to the friendship than the bad hangout itself. One quiet dinner or one conversation that fizzled rarely ruins anything on its own. What ruins progress is the story people tell themselves afterward. That the whole friendship must not be working, which makes them quietly stop showing up, which then actually does end the exposure and confirms the fear. The people who actually build strong adult friendships aren't the ones who never have an awkward hangout. They're the ones who show up again the following week anyway, treating one flat interaction as noise instead of a verdict. If you put all of this together, making friends as an adult isn't a charisma contest. It's a repeated exposure logistics problem. You stop chasing single perfect interactions and start building recurring structures. You're willing to be the one who organizes. You engineer your own proximity instead of treating it as fixed. You lower your bar for what counts as a valid rep. You expect the difficulty curve instead of quitting right before it pays off. You track your actual reps instead of trusting your mood. And you forgive the awkward sessions fast enough that one flat hangout doesn't end the whole thing. None of this requires you to become a fundamentally more outgoing or interesting person. It just requires you to show up in the same room, on a schedule, more times than feels necessary. Anyway, if that helped, I'm collecting donations in the form of subscribes to fund the next video.